I'm an avid hiker, and during a cross-country trip, I found myself in Utah. It was supposed to be an adventure, a way to clear my mind after a devastating breakup. I had thought she was a one, but catching her with one of my closest friends shattered that illusion. Betrayal on both sides. I was 31 and eager to explore Utah, one of the states I had been most excited about. With its breathtaking landscapes and vast forests, it felt like the perfect escape. I chose Wasatch National Forest as my hiking destination after hearing great things about it. One of its biggest appeals was its secluded areas, exactly what I needed. Crowded trails have never been my thing. I picked an unnamed part of the forest, drove down a narrow access road as far as I could, and parked my car. Stepping out, I took in the stillness of my surroundings. No service on my phone, just the way I liked it. I made a mental note of my starting point, geared up, and began my trek. I know hiking alone in uncharted territory is risky, but I enjoy the thrill of exploring without a designated route. I always download a digital map beforehand, since GPS works even without service. And no, I didn't get lost. I wish that was my story. It would be easier to explain. My destination was a lookout point at the summit, about 3 or 4 miles away. The terrain was rough, so I was moving at a slow pace, maybe 1.5 miles per hour. An hour in, it started raining. Though it was light, I couldn't stand hiking in the rain, so I turned back, retracing my steps. As my car came into view, relief washed over me. Until I got closer, my stomach dropped. All 4 tires were slashed. There was no way this was an accident. Someone had done this on purpose. A wave of fear hit me. I whipped my head around, scanning the forest in every direction. Nothing. I listened as carefully as I could, but the rain drowned out any sounds. I was stuck. Without service, I couldn't call for help. I had lost service more than 20 miles down the road, and walking back to civilization seemed impossible. I needed high ground. The summit, the destination I originally set out for, was my best chance. I didn't feel safe walking along the open road for miles, so I turned back into the woods. Halfway to the summit, I heard something behind me, a faint rustling about 40 yards away. It stopped when I stopped. My heart pounded. I didn't turn around. I just walked faster. Whoever or whatever was following me, I knew I was a quicker hiker. The sun was setting, casting eerie shadows through the forest. The rain continued to fall. I kept moving. After putting some distance between me and the noise, I took a quick glance over my shoulder. Nothing, but someone could have been hiding behind any of the countless trees. Finally, I reached the peak. By some miracle, I had service. I didn't waste a second. I called the police, explained my situation, and gave them the exact location of my car. I also told them I had AAA. Hanging up, I felt some relief. Someone knew where I was, but I had another problem. I had to get back before it got completely dark and avoid whoever had been stalking me. Going straight back was too dangerous. I decided to take a semicircular route along the cliff before cutting back into the woods at a different angle. I checked my map and prayed my navigation skills wouldn't fail me. For a while, everything was quiet, too quiet. Just as I started to think I was in the clear, a twig snapped to my left. I turned, nothing. A few minutes later, another sound, this time behind me. My blood ran cold. There wasn't just one person. There were multiple. I picked up my pace, settling into a light jog. Then, I stumbled upon something that made my panic skyrocket. A makeshift campsite, tucked deep in the woods. A dozen logs sat in a circle around a fire pit. Someone had been here. Recently, I veered around it, glancing back every few steps. Then I saw it. A foot, just barely disappearing behind a tree. That was it. I broke into a full sprint. The sounds behind me grew louder. They weren't hiding anymore. I was being chased. I didn't dare look back. My only focus was reaching my car. The terror of knowing people were hunting me through the forest was like nothing I'd ever experienced. Exhaustion clawed at my legs, but I couldn't slow down. My life depended on it. Then, through the trees, I saw it. My car, and next to it, a police officer. I ran straight to him, collapsing in exhaustion. I could barely catch my breath. When I turned back to point out my pursuers, they were gone. Not a trace of them. The cop had already called AAA. I gave him my full report. What he told me chilled me to my core. Apparently, Utah has a history of isolated religious groups and woods folk. He explained that the area I had been hiking and was known for strange cult-like activity. It wasn't uncommon for hikers to stumble across things they shouldn't see. And I was stupid for wandering into an unmarked part of the forest alone. Maybe he was right. Maybe I did walk into something I wasn't meant to see. But one thing still doesn't make sense to me. If they were just angry that I was on their land, why not just tell me? Why stalk me? Why slash my tires? Why chase me? Even years later, I still think about that night all the time. It was the winter of 2015, and I was working at a doctor's office in Branson, Missouri. I had just gotten a new iPhone and was excited to try out the time-lapse mode on its camera. On my drive home from work one early evening, I decided to stop and capture the sunset over Table Rock Lake. It was a gorgeous evening, and the winter sun would be setting soon. I parked my SUV at a state park entry parking lot. Mine was the only car in sight, but that didn't alarm me. As I stepped out, I realized how incredibly chilly it was. It was sunny but blistering cold. I opened the back of my vehicle, put on some gloves and a better pair of shoes, then took off down a trail that led to the edge of the lake. I noticed the Branson Belle showboat slowly making its way across the lake for its sunset voyage, and thought it would be neat to capture in the time lapse. I was a single 31-year-old female with a lifetime of experience doing risky things on my own without consequence. The path down to the water was marked with large rocks on each side. In a hurry to get to the shore and set up my shot, I lost my footing and fell hard. My head landed on a sharp rock that could have knocked me out if I hadn't managed to stop the impact just in time. My knee and one of my hands stung badly. It suddenly hit me how reckless this was. No one knew where I was, and I had nearly incapacitated myself on a vacant trail in freezing temperatures just minutes from dark. As I sat there recovering from my fall, I decided I was close enough to the shore and started filming right where I had fallen. That was when I heard it. "Can I borrow a light?" I nearly jumped out of my skin. I turned around, and there he was, standing about 20 feet behind me. I quickly replied that I was sorry, but I didn't have a lighter because I didn't smoke. "I saw you getting out of your car up there," he said. "You have a real nice ass, you know." Where had he come from? There hadn't been a single soul in sight when I parked and walked down the trail. What he said next still haunts me. Within less than a minute of appearing, his fourth sentence to me was, "Hey, do you want to have asterisk, asterisk, asterisk?" I knew I was in a lot of trouble. No one would hear me if I screamed. Sure, the Branson Belle was out in the water, but it was several football field lengths away, and I was practically invisible to them. They wouldn't hear me over the sound of the massive ship anyway. Without missing a beat, I pretended to be interested. I told him it was too cold to do anything outside, and that we should go to my car instead. My mind raced. I just needed to get off this trail before the sun went down. I abandoned my plan to capture the sunset. I don't remember everything he said as we walked up to the parking lot, but at one point, he asked if he could touch my butt. I agreed. I knew it was a test. I still wasn't sure he was going to let me leave the trail unharmed, and anything I could do or say to keep him calm was my best chance of making it out alive. How had I got myself into this situation? God, I was so stupid. Just let me make it out of this, and I swear I'll be smarter. His hand stayed down the back of my pants for the rest of the walk. When we finally reached the parking lot, my heart sank. Mine was still the only car there, except for an unfamiliar vehicle that hadn't been there earlier. It had to be his. He had been watching me, waiting, and then followed me down the trail. You might wonder why I didn't call 911. The answer is simple. He was watching my every move. I had to play along. I had to make it off the trail first. I had hoped the cold would be a good excuse to avoid whatever he had planned, but now, in the empty parking lot, I realized I wasn't safe yet. My next mission was to get inside my vehicle and escape. We stood by his car as he continued to say vile things. Things I can't even bring myself to write. I played along, trying to get him to tell me his name, but he refused. Why wouldn't someone give their name? Then he unzipped his pants. I insisted we walk to my SUV first. He reached into his car and grabbed something. I couldn't see it clearly, but I was almost certain it was a gun. As we walked toward my car, I pressed the unlock button once, knowing it would only open the driver's side door. My keys were in my hand. Ready? The moment I got inside, he reached for the passenger door. I threw the car in reverse, my tires spinning on the loose gravel. Then I slammed it into drive and floored it. I was too afraid to look in the rear-view mirror. I called 911 and gave them his description. Oddly, he was a handsome enough guy, about 6 feet tall, blonde hair, brown eyes, slightly muscular, probably between 25 and 30 years old. You wouldn't look at him and think anything remarkable or dangerous. I never saw his license plate, but I described his car, a pale blue, early 90s model that reminded me of my great-grandfather's Oldsmobile. After taking my statement, I never heard from the police again. I may never know what exactly he has done, but I do know one thing. When I looked into his eyes, I saw the presence of absolute evil. I wouldn't call myself an expert hiker, but I've been avidly enjoying the activity for a few decades now. I've traversed all the major trails in America and visited over 75% of this beautiful country's national parks. Because of this, I've had to find new ways to keep things exciting. Recently, I picked up a new hobby, scouring Google Maps for vast, unnamed forests and exploring them. It's a little unconventional, but I think the added excitement is worth the risk of getting lost. Or at least, I used to think so. To ensure I don't lose my way, I carry a pack of homemade route marking stickers that I periodically slap onto trees. As I pass each one on my way back, I pull them off to avoid leaving any litter behind. I'm honestly surprised more people haven't picked up on this trick. It makes getting lost in a forest nearly impossible. This time, however, I had set my sights on a slightly more daunting challenge. I decided to explore Dudleytown Forest in Connecticut, a place that would likely give any normal person pause. If you don't know, the entire town has been abandoned since the 1800s, and there are all sorts of eerie accounts about strange occurrences. If you're into that kind of thing, you should definitely look it up. I'm not, though. I'm not superstitious, and I don't believe in ghost stories. Technically, this forest is off limits to the public, but that hasn't stopped me before. In fact, I saw it as an advantage. It pretty much guaranteed I wouldn't run into anyone, which is usually what I prefer. Being from New England, the drive wasn't too bad either. I entered the woods around noon to ensure I had plenty of daylight to complete my hike. My first impression of the forest was, honestly, unsettling. I had heard that it was eerily silent, but I wasn't prepared for just how true that was. You don't really notice all the sounds in a typical forest until they're completely gone. Imagine sitting in a soundproof room with your eyes closed, hearing nothing but your own breathing. That's what it was like. To be fair, this wasn't my first time experiencing a forest devoid of animals, so I tried to shake off the unease and kept walking, placing my stickers as I went. I kept expecting to stumble upon an animal or at least some sign of life, but there was nothing. After a while, I found myself actually hoping to run into another person. That's how unsettled I was. But then, oddly enough, the silence stopped bothering me. For the first time since stepping into the woods, I felt calm. The feeling didn't last long. Out of nowhere, I picked up on a sound that sent a chill down my spine. It was a wailing, moaning noise, the kind of sound you'd expect from a wounded animal. That's the best way I can describe it. Even now, I still struggle to put into words. It was especially disturbing because it was the only sound in the entire forest. I froze, straining my ears to identify it. I had never heard anything like it. There was a chance it could have been the wind whistling through the trees, but there wasn't any wind at all. That didn't make sense. I told myself it was probably just an injured animal, even though deep down, I knew it probably wasn't. I walked away from the sound until it faded into the distance. You're probably wondering why I didn't just turn around. and leave right then. I wish I had an answer to that. I told myself that if one more creepy thing happened, that would be it. I'd turn back. As I continued, my mind started racing. How would an animal even get wounded in a place like this? Was someone hunting out here? If so, there's no way I could have missed the sound of a gunshot, unless it had happened before I was within earshot. Or maybe the hunter had left it suffering instead of finishing the job. But would someone really do that? My thoughts were interrupted when I stumbled upon something carved into a tree directly in front of me. Honest to God, there were symbols etched into bark. I know it sounds cliche, but I'm being completely serious. These weren't letters or words, just strange slashes and chunks of missing bark. I glanced around and saw that several nearby trees were marked with similar carvings. That was it. I turned around without a second thought and began retracing my steps, pulling off my stickers as I went. I'm naturally curious, but even I was thinking, screw this. I followed my markers for a while, tried to calm myself down, until I noticed something ahead that I hadn't seen before. A cave, or maybe a bear's den. I stopped in my tracks. I know myself. There was a 0% chance I would have overlooked something like a cave on my way in. And then it hit me. My trail markers were too low. They should have been at shoulder height, but now they were at my waist. My blood ran cold. Someone had moved my stickers, trying to lead me toward that cave. I spun around and sprinted in the opposite direction, my heart pounding in my chest. I kept glancing over my shoulder, unable to shake the horrifying realization. Someone had been tracking me the entire time. I didn't have time to process it. I just focused on getting the hell out of that forest. The problem was, without my original trail markers, I was completely lost. I ran blindly, no longer trying to be quiet. There was no point. The forest was dead silent apart from my own frantic footsteps. I finally stopped to catch my breath and yanked out my phone, praying for a signal. By some miracle, I had one bar. I quickly pulled up my parked car's location on the map and figured out which direction I needed to go. I wasn't far, and just like that, the signal dropped. It didn't matter. I knew where I was going now. That's when the wailing started again. Only this time, it was twice as loud. I ran faster than I ever had in my life. I don't think I've ever been that fast, even in my fittest years. The sound was right behind me, but every time I turned to look, there was nothing there. The next 10 minutes were the worst of my life. But finally, I saw the forest edge. The moment I crossed the tree line, the wailing stopped abruptly. I didn't stop running. I jumped into my car, slammed the door shut, and sped the hell out of there before whatever was chasing me had a chance to catch up. That day ruined hiking for me. Here's my rational explanation for what happened. Some hermit or woods freak lives in those trees. He spotted me before I spotted him, tracked me, and moved my trail markers to lure me toward that cave. I'm assuming he had some kind of whistle or device to make that wailing noise, which is why it stopped so suddenly once he realized I was getting away. But I know there are holes in this theory. For example, how could someone blow a whistle that long while also running at full speed? I don't know. I'm open to any explanations. Maybe there's a reason that forest is off limits to civilians.